working. Yes, this is working. Okay, so first on the workshop agenda is our construction project update and facilities committee. So I talked with a number of folks, and at this point, we are going to look to activate a facilities committee. And I have asked Bill Lysette, Dr. Wayok, and Stephen Maud to serve on that committee to advise us and our superintendent. Any questions?
Will that, the committee meetings then be, a calendar be generated and put on the
Yes,
public?
these are public meetings and they will be announced in advance and folks can attend and I believe we can allow public comment prior to. The agenda is published.
Great.
The agenda has to be published. Okay?
Yeah, great.
All right, moving on.
Great, very good. The next part of our agenda is related to COVID planning, and it's widely known in southern Lehigh and Lehigh County and actually across the nation that one of the challenges being faced in public schools is that of staffing and staffing shortages. We've all been challenged through members of our staff who've been sick, and people come to school in an absence of substitutes and ask for people to fill in. And so I'm very pleased to introduce tonight our new Director of Human Resources, Anthony Pigeon, because we recognize this as a problem and we know that we have to work to try to solve it. And I think we have some good plans and thoughts that we're going to be doing in the very, very near future. And we've already actually made some steps, positive steps in this already, but Mr. Pigeon, if you could talk about how we're going to fill this place with substitutes. Floor is yours.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Thank you. As was just stated, we have an issue with substitutes, as do most of the school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So one of the things that I want to talk about is why is there an issue with substitutes? And some of this information might be a repeat. You might have heard this before, but again, just so we're all on the same page.
Microphone.
I do have a gym voice. I can bring it up if you want.
The folks on Zoom though, we're
Can you hear me? All right, so why is there a shortage of substitute teachers? In the state of Pennsylvania, in 2010, the state was producing about 14,000 teachers yearly. In 2017, or 2018, we're only producing about 5,000 teachers. There's a lot of reasons for that, but obviously with that lack of teachers coming in, all those people that have those certifications are now being put into teaching positions and aren't available to substitute. That's number one. Also, overall, I don't think there's a lot of individuals who understand the emergency permit process and the process of becoming a substitute teacher. And that, when I say individuals, I don't mean the community, I mean school districts. I mean the community, I mean everybody. They really don't understand that process. So we're going to talk about that a little bit also. So our current fill rates, and this is from the last 90 days, from about October 11th to today, there have been 25, almost 2,600 absences. And this is not just teachers, this is all staff. Of that 26 or 2566, 1,165 teachers and other professional staff members. When I say professional staff members, individuals within the teacher contract have been absent. 976 teachers requested substitutes in that time, and 564 of those requests were filled at a fill rate of 57%, almost 58%. So it's not great, but it's not as bad as some of the other districts around us. But there's a lot of room for improvement here. So currently in our frontline system, we have about 133 substitutes active. Of that 133 substitutes, 70 of them have not yet worked this year, or haven't worked since 10/11/21. So there's a large number, over half have not worked yet this year. I'm sorry, I'm reading that backwards. 63 haven't worked, there are 70 who have been working on a regular basis, that gives us our 133. So, we're gonna be working with those individuals to see where they are and what they are going to be doing moving forward. So who can substitute in Pennsylvania? Those with active and valid teaching certificates, retirees with a valid certificate. Remember, a retiree does not have to do that Act 48, those hours of professional development, so their certificate doesn't go inactive. So that's why I listed valid only. Individuals with an out-of-state certificate, by petitioning the state, they can be substitutes. Individuals who are enrolled in a teacher program, a teacher training program with more than 60 credits can substitute. There was a new law that just came out recently that was limited to 20 days a year, and that new law expanded that. And number 5, any individual who has a bachelor's degree in any subject can apply for an emergency permit. And I put 06 up here, and that's more for me, because that's what number of permit it is, an emergency permit. That's for a day-to-day substitute. So a person can apply for that, but only if the school district can approve that to go to the state. So that's really important also, but anybody with a bachelor's certificate can be a substitute. So our plan moving forward, in the short term, first thing is we're contacting all of our current substitutes to see where they are, what they're doing, why haven't they been working, if they want to continue to be on our list. We're also going to be looking at our current substitute applications in our system. I had a group interview scheduled for Friday. So I was one that wasn't really first in the day, because I had 16 people coming in as part of a group interview to be substitutes. So I've rescheduled that, and hopefully we'll be having that this week. And we'll get those individuals in and get them enrolled. We're gonna also determine the building absence rates based on the percentage of staff in the buildings. So we can take a look at that and see where we're really coming up short and why we're coming up short. That will be part of the review of the current absent data. And we're going to do a community outreach program. So one of the things that we're looking at is, I'm very new to Southern Lehigh, but I see a district that is wonderful. I see community coming to board meetings. I see people involved in the schools and wanting to be involved in the schools. So we're going to be doing some outreach to the community to see if we can get people coming to substitute. One of the things that I shared with our administrative team is, if you go to any of our elementary schools, the intermediate school, or even the middle school or high school, you'll see a line of cars at the end of the day, parents waiting to pick up their children. It's a perfect opportunity to reach out to those people to say, hey, if you're coming here on a daily basis to pick up your child, why don't you work with us in the interim? And we can work on some things that way, and work with the individuals to present the opportunity to be substitutes. Long term, we're going to be developing an internal guest teacher program. A lot of school districts don't believe or don't understand that they can provide their own guest teacher program, but a district can. Most of the IUs across the Commonwealth provide guest teacher programs, but individual districts can also. We're going to continue with that community outreach, trying to get people involved and working to work with us as a substitutes. We're going to be reviewing our current pay rates and determine if changes are necessary. Yes, sir.
What's the guest, could you elaborate on the guest teacher program? I'm not familiar with that.
Absolutely. Guest teacher program is something that was started by IU 20 in the late 90s. It's an emergency permit process where anybody, as I shared, anybody with a bachelor's degree can be emergency permitted to be a day-to-day substitute teacher. It's a 1 year, it's a school year certificate, so it has to be renewed every year. Person would still go through all the requirements of being hired, just like any other substitute, clearances, physical, everything else that is required. They have to produce a transcript that they have a bachelor's degree in the state of Pennsylvania, and then the state will approve them to get a certificate for 1 school year. And again, it can be renewed as many times as you need it to be. That's the emergency or the guest teacher program. And like I said, the IUs have run that traditionally in the state, but individual districts can also.
Just a follow-up question. How long does that process take? How long does it take to go through that process?
So a guest teacher program trains the person, gives them some insights on how to be a substitute teacher. Usually that's only a day or 2 process. And then the certificate goes off to the state. Once their certificate is paid for and their guest teacher or an 06 permit, a day-to-day sub permit is $5. Once that's paid for, it's pretty much automatically issued by the state, unless there is some issue with the person, something with their clearances or something of that nature. It's pretty much an initial, or instant. So it's not a long process at all once we get rolling on it.
And that's, anybody can apply for that who has a bachelor's degree, just any bachelor's degree, you can apply for that program?
So anybody, what we would do as part of our process is we'd have interviews. And we look for folks with certain credentials, certain abilities, certain personalities, somebody that we believe can work with the students. We have just very simple interviews to make sure somebody could do what we're asking them to, and kind of give them kind of an outline of what it looks like and what we will be asking them. So they're feeling comfortable with that also. But yes, once if they go through the interview process, we get them into the training program. And again, I'll work with the administrative team to develop that training program. Like I said, it'll be a day and a half process. We'll sit with them, we'll work them through the application process and the teacher information management system, the TIMS system, and then we'll get it all uploaded to the state. Other questions? As I said, we're going to be reviewing our current pay rates for our substitutes, make sure we're competitive. Also take a look at maybe some outside vendors to see what they can offer the Southern Lehigh School District for providing substitutes. We can work with universities. Part of the process, again, as I mentioned earlier, is any student in a teacher prep program can be a substitute for up to 20 days if they have 60 credits. Well, the state also expanded the regulations and created another caveat that somebody with 60 credits can also be a monitor, a classroom monitor. So we'll be taking a look at that law to make sure if we can use that and meet our needs in Southern Lehigh. And that's the last one that I was just talking about.
Can I ask a quick question about that? As our rep on the IU board, there was some discussion about a program that would involve, that the CLIU was pursuing, that would involve individuals who were seeking to, let's say, change careers and become teachers, would then do their coursework, but could be hired by districts to simultaneously student teach as their, is that a possibility as well, long-term? This is not going to be a short-term solution, but long-term for our district, did I miss that as being part of what you were describing?
No, that's actually part of the process of looking for either teachers and or substitutes is getting the certification. One of the drawbacks, or sometimes the universities have balked, and that would be working with the universities, is they want people to student teach in different environments. But if you have good relationships with the universities, then you can say, hey, we want this person to come here, and it's called an intern permit. It's a separate type of permit, where somebody can be working in a full-time capacity and student teaching and working in that capacity. So, again, there's only certain universities that can offer that, and I have a list on my desk, I don't have it with me. But that's a whole other permit, but we can gladly go down that road also. And that's one that I would encourage to go down, because it's a fully certified person then.
Right, that's where I was going with that, thank you. And some people want to change careers, but you really just can't have that year gap of no income or no health care, and as a resource, people who've worked in industry and could provide a great, once they get intense teacher training, that would be wonderful.
I agree.
Thank you very much. Or, I'm sorry,
Again, this is just the community outreach. Some of the things we're talking about doing is the flyers, using our monthly menus to put out information to parents. I mean, one of the things as a parent myself, I always read that monthly menu to see what my kid's going to be eating. So it's another way to reach out to the community using our established needs that our principals have in social media. And then we'll work with days and times for the training and so on and so forth moving forward. Does anybody have any questions?
I did not mean to rush you. That was all good news. You never rush good news, they say. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to note that our teachers are doing an amazing job covering for each other, running from place to place, making sure great things are happening for our students. That's another aspect we want to mention. Really good work. So that concludes that aspect.
Yes. Just on that issue, I was curious if you really get in that staffing crunch, what is the sort of the
72 beats per minute, is the.
Are you gonna be teaching second grade next week?
Very well could be. Very well
I think I read about that in the paper, it was, somebody was doing it.
Setting us all back.
Yeah, that's a bad one on his.
We sent a note to her complaining, but no, so we, really is all hands on deck. People are just pitching in at every level, including our bus drivers, helping out each other. We did have a delay this morning, but, so again, this is it's a challenge we're facing. It's not as bad as in other places, but with the Pigeon's help and the help of our community, we're gonna take steps to mitigate these challenges we're facing. So that concludes the first two parts of the work session. The third, of course, is discussion of our health and safety plan. And so I just leave that open for the board's consideration as we have a voting item on our regular session agenda to consider this. Perhaps we would discuss what exactly that item we want to consider would look like as we move into the next meeting.
Just a quick question before we start. Can you, Dr. Mann, there was a proposal in here. Can you let me know where that proposal came from?
Yes. Dr. Serene had a great interest in this and been talking about it, and she put that proposal together and sent it in and asked that it be considered. And so in response to that request, I thought it appropriate to share that with the board as I did. Yes.
I mean, I guess it makes sense then with that introduction for me to bring it up. I think that in approaching this issue, my concern was, as we were discussing at the last meeting, the surge has continued. We kind of had a feeling that Omicron would be a variant that would infect a lot of people. I mean, the good news is that this variant itself is not causing as severe a disease, which is good. The problem is, of course, when hospitals are already overloaded and there's a surge, if you hit enough people, you're still going to get enough to push us over the edge. What I think really at this point, given the debates that we've had, I think it makes sense for us to focus on whatever common ground we have, given the new divisions amongst the board members. And I really, for me, this isn't about trying to keep kids in masks longer. I'm concerned by seeing the rising numbers in the community. And obviously, when you have rising numbers in the community, as we're seeing, that also impacts those that are in our school buildings. So that includes staff, that includes teachers, substitutes, further, of course, worsening the situation with substitute shortages, and students. So we have, I think what's key is I want to keep kids in the classroom, as many kids in the classroom as possible. And ideally, I want to have a higher level of education for those students. It's not just having them in the building. I would like them to also have our wonderful teachers in front of them whenever possible. And I know it's going to happen and that they're going to have to cover each other, given the, sometimes we have more niche teaching subjects or courses, so have you. And the other part of this, and I know this drew a lot of, ire on social media, was the tiered system. Truly, I wasn't intending to make it something that was more restrictive. Actually, if you look at what we used before, this is far less restrictive. I actually utilized what Parkland is doing as a guide for me, because I looked at what our neighboring districts are doing because I didn't know where to start. And I took their tiered system and I had to remove some things, and that was, where I did have some guidance from Dr. Mann, and that Parkland also has information within their tiered program that includes vaccination data, for example, which, it would be helpful if we had it, but I've gotten the impression that we are unable to obtain that at this point. The reason it's helpful is because, everybody keeps talking about how we're vaccinated now. Obviously, that information is relevant, right? The more vaccinated individuals you have, the better. However, I think right now, the problem is with Omicron, it's transmissible amongst both, right? It's vaccinated and unvaccinated. So that's why I didn't have any differentiation in any of this between those two groups. And the metrics are actually, what they did was they took, in the past when we did this, it was the CDC's guidelines or metrics, and it was low, moderate, substantial, and high, right? And so substantial and high, we always masked. That was the recommendation, and we pretty much followed that previously. What they did was they took low and moderate and put it together in tier 1, and then they put the substantial pretty much in tier 2, and split some of the high between both tier 2 and tier 3. So that's where the divisions kind of like came up. Truly, I can understand, this is less restrictive, looking at these percentages, I think our most recent data is, our case rate per 100,000 right now is ridiculous, it's 6,700, and the percent positivity is 39.9. I know, I've heard it, and I acknowledge that it doesn't include just our district, but obviously that's very, very skewed high, so obviously, according to this, we would mask. The reason I put in the tiered system was because I feel like for the community, I think for us as board members, I don't want to spend every board meeting spending about 2 to 5 hours talking about masking. I really do want to focus on what's important within the district, like programs that I know Dr. Main is going to focus on today. I really do want to move forward with talking about facilities and education projects and see what we've learned with respect to learning loss and what we're doing to catch kids up. That was the end, so we didn't keep having this, oh no, it's going away, what are we doing, I feel like it's a constant level of stress in the community, and that was the only reason. So, in terms of the timing, I put February 28th because the WinTV at this point, I think our networks are expecting it to continue like this for at least 2 more weeks. And then it should subside. Right now, we do, of course, have flu, RSV contributing to hospitalizations, and the mask will help keep our kids healthier and our staff healthier. So my thought was, getting us through the coldest of the winter months. That was, I don't know if you want to reopen the discussion of masking. I did do some digging, just since I have the floor, that way I can turn it over to everybody else. I don't want to dominate moving forward, but, in the prior meeting, what I had, because, I think for all of us, it's like pros or cons. You divide everything into pros and cons, and to me, the pros of masking are what I already stated. To me, community health is obviously very important given what I do, but also I would rather our kids, even though they're vaccinated, if we choose to, and they relatively have milder cases, I don't want my child to be knocked out of school or activities for, 5 days minimum at least at this point. And I think a lot of people feel that way. The cons that were described to me when I asked, because I didn't perceive them previously, I think we all gathered that, were speech and development. So I did kind of do a deeper dive, and I reached out to speech pathologists that work in the district, as well as those that are in the community. And internally within the district, we have had no further increase with respect to entrance and exit rates for those that need additional assistance with speech patterns, which I found reassuring. In addition, I was told by local speech pathologists that they also are seeing the same thing. What they have found is that they've been able to modify how they approach students who need additional help with respect to facial expressions. They take cues. And certainly the American Academy of Pediatrics has weighed in on this as well. There's also clear face masks, and actually they do use them. So, because I obviously I don't want to make this a more negative situation for anyone's child. And I think one of the most resounding pieces for me also are that while every parent wants to choose what's best for their child, in this situation, one parent's choice is impacting or could negatively impact another child. So I think that's the problem here, right? Like it's not, we're not all acting in isolation.
Okay, let me ask a few questions, Doctor. Can you hear me? Am I coming through? Oh, I have questions about the guiding metrics you selected, which are county-wide for Lehigh County. If it's my understanding, we have a student population in southern Lehigh of about 3170, correct? That's 0.8% of Lehigh County's total population. If the cases were distributed evenly among the county, that would mean that tier 3, or 75, infections per 100,000 population over a 7-day period amounts to 0.6 students in our entire school district in a 7-day period, and we're already in tier 3. So that means that there could easily be a situation based upon these guiding metrics where there's 0 COVID cases in southern Lehigh, but we still have children in masks.
I mean, in tier 3, I mean, we could modify something. I'm open to suggestions. I don't need to be,
Yeah, I just am
put on the
concerned.
spot here, but
No.
what I'm saying,
Well, it's a question, because I think that it's,
I did include internal case counts for that reason, and certainly I think we could adjust the wording with respect to and versus or. Parkland has and/or, to make it more confusing, I think. So I'm not sure how they deal with that situation, and I know I've asked, the superintendents need to see how they handle that situation.
so my fear with these guiding metrics is we'll never end. As a
I
result.
mean, one thing I do want to put out, I mean, I'm okay, I can easily compromise on the tiers and the guiding metrics. I think to me, when it comes to, I'm always open to compromise and I'm very collaborative, right? That's always been the way I've been in all walks of life. I think one thing you have to keep in mind is these aren't written in stone. If we were to find that it's like ridiculously low in because we do, and I know that we have happily a new assistant superintendent. In the past, what we did with the pandemic committee is we actually did crunch the numbers further. We did not just operate on the basis of Lehigh County. We used zip code data in order to determine what our actual population was doing. And then we could utilize that instead. I mean, I just was using a district as, I wanted to come up with something to serve as a starting point, truly. But I think once we have personnel back in place with respect to central office, I think we could do that. I didn't have that.
I think
Just
ultimately,
a real quick question, sorry about
go ahead.
So these are just straight cases, right? We're not going to differentiate on hospitalizations or, these are just straight cases, obviously.
And that's
I guess
why I
one-
use the word guided.
Yeah.
Right, because obviously those, and I mentioned that too, right now we have a lot of case counts. The hospitalizations are very high, but how much of that is still left over from the prior surge and other health issues, of course.
And then in the hospitalizations, just so everyone knows, 80 to 90% are those who are not vaccinated. So, we're at the point now where I think, really, we have a choice. Really, everyone has a choice, and I think when the previous board spoke about this back in November, a lot of the guidance from this, and Superintendent had mentioned allowing time for everyone to get their child vaccinated and now fully vaccinated, so getting 2 doses. I think the data just came out just today from New York that looked at the rate of hospitalizations for a vaccinated child, fully vaccinated child. 2 to 3 children per 1 million. So that's the level of risk we're talking about with children from this current, and this is actually based on Omicron data. So that's what, I think that's, hopefully I really want to provide the community reassurance as far as the risk, and you mentioned this, and I appreciate that the risk based upon this variant remains extremely low for children. I mean, really almost, thankfully, extremely low, and also very low for vaccinated adults without significant comorbidities. And I think that's also just an important point as we talk about, some of these. The only one question I had is Dr. Serena, I had reached out to you on December 7th, so a month ago, prior to that last meeting that we had, wanting to work with you on this. And you mentioned how you're collaborative and want to, work with others on this. I didn't get an email or a text message or a phone call to work with you on this. I think it would be wonderful if two physicians on the board, two medical physicians on the board, could have worked on something like this. And it's just, I'm sorry, but these metrics to me are just, they're just not where I think we need to be as a society. That's a macro picture. I think we really need to ask ourselves this, and then this is actually now being asked at the national level. So this is probably the next, the next step is, do we really need to count cases? You mentioned how many cases, we're getting thousands of cases now. Omicron is, unfortunately, going through, we're all going to have a date with this very soon. At some point, we're all going to encounter this virus. And if we are vaccinated, and if you're healthy, and if you're young, you generally are doing very well with this. The data, as you said, is very reassuring that this is much milder in not only children, but in adults as well.
So, with respect to, your comments, I am collaborative, and I've made that clear. Previously, when I tried to offer amendments to modified quarantine, like test to stay based on information I've learned from other districts, you were not receptive. When it comes to discussing the health and safety plan, I prefer to conduct such discussions amongst board members in the public venue. And unfortunately, based on the way that our interactions have been in the past, it isn't really trustable. So, I'm being honest. And it's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. When it comes to the rest of it, I as you mentioned, I did acknowledge that Omicron is less, worrisome, which is great. And I think that since one, I'm not a fear monger, nor do I want to freak people out. I think though the reality is that even though it's less, serious with respect to the impact which you mentioned, kids still, when it's very transmissible, right? We know that it's impressively transmissible. So, you're getting kids knocked out of school as they, and that's going to continue, and it's already happening even at lunch when they're not, they have their masks off, right? So, what I'm saying is we want our kids to be in school as much as possible, not on Zoom. The more kids you have on Zoom, the more difficult it is for our teachers to actually engage with both sets of students, those in the classroom and those at home. And we're trying to move away from that hybrid and virtual model as it is. You talk about the mental toll that this has taken, I think, on all of us, not just our children, but us as adults. Clearly, we're all under a lot more stress, right? So it took a toll on our children, and it continues to do so. And I don't think any of us want to go backwards. None of us want our kids sitting at home in front of a computer again, and we certainly don't want them knocked out of activities. Right? Like, if they're having fun, we're having fun watching them. That's what I want to focus on. So look, I'm, like I said, not married to guiding metrics. If we want to table that until we get past this surge, that's fine. But I want to continue masking through this surge so that we continue to have kids in the classroom as much as we can, with teachers in front of them that are certified and for that subject matter. Even before we got to this level, we already had teachers out and kids sitting in auditoriums doing essentially study halls for weeks. Based on the number of teachers that were out in middle school, for example. I want kids to actually receive quality instruction. It's not just about being in a classroom, right? And subs, when you need them, may not be available, although I think it's fantastic that we have, that we're looking into it. That's extremely reassuring to me, but that's somebody else.
I think we all want to get back to as close to a normal education as possible. We would really like to, all of us, start talking about education and how we move forward. And when we talk about education in a public school setting, there are the students who are here to be educated, but there's also the consideration for those who facilitate their education in our buildings. And we need to look to them because they are indeed the people executing this every day in the classroom. And after last board meeting, we had many different facilitators of education in our buildings at all levels, teachers and support staff, and the union did a survey of its staff. And the folks who responded to that, they had an excellent response rate. I think it was 90% response rate. The overwhelming majority of the people who facilitate education in our buildings have said that mask optional at this point in time, right now, would be an impediment to getting back to focusing on education. And so if the people in those rooms are asking us to help them by having a universal masking continue past tonight, then I think it does a disservice to not only our kids, but our community and our entire culture to be dismissive of that. We need to listen to that. These are the folks who are executing it on a daily basis. This is just not about warm bodies in classrooms. We had a great presentation about substitutes. When we have 50% or so of sub requests not able to be filled, that means that kids are in auditorium spaces. And I think Dr. Mann summed it up very well when he said, I think the substitute requirement these days is like 72 beats per minute. And we do what we can. And our teachers have been doing what they can for, 20 months now, at least, or more. And they've been turning this around on a dime. And right now they're telling us they would love to get back to focusing on education. And the one thing they need to be able to focus on education is to not continually rehash this item on a daily basis or every 2 weeks. And I think in that regard, some sort of predictable tiered, we can talk about the metrics. Maybe it's based on something else. Maybe it's based on cases by zip code, and we can focus on what that is. And we now have the central staff to be able to, the ability to divide and conquer on those fronts. So but if our individuals in classrooms who are teaching these kids are saying, in order to keep them healthy and functioning physically and mentally, and also for them to be able to deliver a product and actually focus on teaching and not focus on whether this child should be wearing a mask or that child should be wearing a mask. And we had great teacher emails about, here's some questions I have that I don't have answers to because we haven't been able to be a part of the solution. So give us time to be a part of the solution, and please maintain universal masking, because taking them away now would be an impediment to education. And that is why I think it's important to continue universal masking past this date and to give some sort of guiding metrics so that we don't have to all keep focusing on tomorrow, what's it going to be, what's it going to be, what's it going to be. We have a plan, we can focus on education and let the experts in those classrooms guide us.
I have one other thing to add, I realized I forgot. And it's not just about, there's the, keeping individual children and staff members in the buildings, but, we do get tallies, obviously, and there's thresholds with the DOH. And, I don't want us to completely shut down with respect to a building, for example, and that's something that could actually happen. We've had neighboring school districts that have had to shift first to, back from the masking optional to masking required, and then to shift again to virtual because their case count was already going up too quickly. So that's a reality that has already occurred with respect to neighboring school districts. So I feel like we should learn from our neighbors and try to prevent a bad situation before it happens.
Do you mind, Dr. Mann, do you just mind discussing what your thoughts are on how close are we to having the Department of Health, coming to shut us down? Is this something, I want to be really clear with the community, because I've heard this a lot in a lot of emails that we're going to be shut down, we're going to be shut down, we're going to be shut down. And I just want to be really clear with the community. I would certainly not support shutting down at all under any significant circumstances. And I really think, please, speak, that the likelihood of that happening is almost zero. But please.
Well, the Department of Health has issued guidelines about so many cases and so many in the building. As, in my opinion, as a practical reality, the Department of Health is not able to keep up with monitoring public schools. I'm not aware of any cases where the Department of Health has actually stepped in. So and my view is going to be that unless the Department of Health orders the superintendent to shut the schools, it will be an independent decision, not something that will be taken easily because we want to keep our doors open. So while I could not exclude the possibility of the Department of Health ordering us closed, I think it's difficult for me to imagine, given even remotely like our circumstances, where we would draw the attention of the Department of Health to that extent.
Thank you. So those other districts that shut down and went virtual, that was their choice. That was based upon their own staffing issues. That's my understanding. It's based upon their own staffing issues and other internal issues. But we have a lot of community members here. I just want them to hear what the health of our community is with regard to staffing and plans.
Our staffing, our staff's great credit, and I guess to the fortune of good health, while down, has been, we've had buildings with no absenteeism today. We have full complements of teachers. I think we had 9 out maybe at the high school or 10. It seems to be that the spread probably is greatest at the high school. But we are not at unprecedented levels of absenteeism, which can change over a very short period of time, of course. But right now, while lots of effort is being made by our administrators and our staff, we're not unstable, and our circumstances are improving as we begin to bring on more substitute teachers because of efforts being made in the central office by Mr. Pigeon, the principals, and others.
That should be celebrated here. That's wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
Transportation is an issue. Just this morning, as a matter of fact, we had to send out a notification that we had some buses running late. That really is the area. That will not shut down buildings, but it could prevent some kids from getting here in the mornings, or most likely in the mornings. So that's probably our biggest area of challenge in our transportation.
Emily, I think you mentioned that you wanted some kind of just clear guidance moving forward, and I agree with that. And I think the clearest guidance we can give to our district is that we would move with the mask option. And I think that should be the clearest guidance that we can give to our families, to our staff. We have to really ask ourselves some big questions. We are masking children in school, and it really is borderline theater. I think Ms. King had mentioned some quotes that cloth masks with Omicron, something that, as Dr. Serene says, spreads almost with like measles-like transmission. Even surgical masks are really, if we're really going to try to prevent transmission, which is a lofty goal, it really is a lofty goal. It's clearly unattainable, as these past 2 years have taught us, that it's unattainable to try to stop a respiratory virus. We have respiratory viruses that circulate every year, and thankfully, the Omicron does not appear to be serious. There's a lot of case numbers, but generally low virulence. This is something that if we're going to mask, we're going to mask in perpetuity. And if we're going to create these metrics based upon cases, we're going to continue to count cases, we're going to mask in perpetuity. And I guess that's a question where I think I'm at moving forward is, are we going to mask these kids in school in perpetuity?
Is that a serious question?
It's obviously a rhetorical question.
You're good. I'm glad it's a rhetorical
Because I
question.
didn't ask for that. So,
Well, we have been masking for, coming up on 2 years, so it's not a completely rhetorical question. And that was with a tiered approach. And so my view of it is, it would have been nice if somewhere along the line, the state mandate or other things, we would have removed some of these draconian measures from the kids when we didn't need to have them, which I've argued all along, but looking in the rearview mirror, I think is apparent to many, then perhaps it would be a lot easier for a number of people to get behind in a crisis, taking extraordinary measures for periods of time to make sure everybody's safe. But, the reality is, we are coming into this crisis with kids having lived under these measures for almost 2 years. And I continue to say that there is an effect of that, and that at some point it has to come to an end. Now, having said that, I'm still also somewhat in the middle here. So I don't buy that. I appreciate very much so Dr. Serene's attempt here. This looks like a lot of work, and I think it's absolutely in good faith, as I think all of us in this community need to continue to remind ourselves of, as we all bicker up here, myself included, tonight. I'm sure I'll get fired up. I had a Coke before I got in here, which is never a good idea. But, everybody is, so it's about risk tolerances and everything, but I am convinced that all the emails we get, everybody sitting out there tonight, everybody listening, and everybody up on this board is in good faith trying to do what they think is best for our kids. I'm convinced of that, and it's completely possible that Dr. Layup and Dr. Serene, two educated medical professionals, can sit here and have maybe a different approach to things, yet I feel very confident that both of them are very well intended and mean the best. So I'm not going to get upset about any of it, and I hope folks in the community don't get upset about this either. I understand it's very important to people, as it should be, but we don't need to create greater division in the community, which I'm beginning to think is more of a problem than this virus. So get off the social media, stop hating your neighbor, and let's find a way, and no matter what happens tonight, it's going to, be okay. And what I would say, I don't agree with the tiered position that Dr. Serene has come up with, which I think is a very reasonable approach, and I'm sure very reasonable to many people listening tonight. And I get what she's trying to achieve, and I think it's fine. For me, that tiered approach has resulted, and I understand we can change guiding metrics, that it wouldn't maybe result so much so. But to Dr. Wayak's point, I do agree that I'm not sure the value of cases at this point. I'm not convinced really as a controlling factor at this point, and I think it'd be difficult to create a tiered system off of it, especially as it's relatively new to us this most recent wave. So I personally, and this is just one person's view, am not interested in a tiered approach. However, and I've been waiting to get our children out of masks and get them eating lunches normally and getting back to a level of normalcy. As much as almost anybody I'm sure listening. Having said that, I personally and it pains me to say it, do believe that to the extent masks are marginally effective, which again, just Jeff Dimmick's thought, I got no research to back it up. Well, that's not totally true. I think masks are marginally effective in a school setting, cloth and all the different types that there are. It seems to me reasonable to believe that they're maybe marginally effective. As we are currently operating somewhat on the margins with our staff, and I'm cheered to hear Dr. Mayon say tonight that that's slightly improving. The question is, if we took the masks off, would that not improve, stay the same? I'm not sure. I tend to think it would probably stay the same, but I don't know that. And I'm not personally willing to gamble at this very moment of this crisis to say that this is the best time to determine that. There are districts to our south that seem to be remaining open, 20,000 kids, I think, in Central Bucks, Penn Ridge, Quakertown. These are large districts that are continuing to operate with a mass optional. So I think it's close. For me, it seems reasonable to extend the mask mandate for a very short period going forward. And I'm open to debating that tonight. And maybe there's no appetite for that, and that's fine. And I get that people don't want to keep talking about it every 2 weeks. But, you know, I'm here till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and it doesn't really bother me. These are important things that we just got to deal with. So that's my way of saying, I believe that a mandatory masking would be appropriate in my mind, given for the purposes, no other purposes other than to ensure staffing to keep these schools open, because I definitely don't want to go back to anything like the experience that we had in the virtual world. And for that reason, and that reason alone, not to stop the flu, not to, you know, protect, we continue to have our children bear the greatest measures of this. That's the crazy thing. You know, we all walk through our own lives, you know, we go to Target and everywhere else. The only people that are subject to this kind of measures are doctors in healthcare facilities and really kids in school. And frankly, when our kids get out of school, they're not even subject to this. So it is really, in some degree, at this point, I'm not sure how effective all of it is, but it has to come to an end. I'm getting long-winded in saying, I personally, and I respect everybody else's view here and in the community, I personally would support not changing that at this moment. And a 2-week, 3-week period of time further till I can see that downward slope, that we, you know, I'm praying that we have something like that South Africa experience where we begin to see, as we have in every other wave, a quick receding of that wave. And the moment we can determine that, I don't need a tear to tell me we're there, at least for the staffing issue, which is the only issue I'm concerned about. At that point, we go ahead and we finally allow kids to begin to live a normal life and live with this virus. I think that seems like a reasonable middle ground. That's what I would support. I'm open to discussing exactly the length of that, if there is support for that idea, and if not, so be it. I don't tend to think I have the exact answers here tonight, but that's my thought about the short-term way forward for the district on this issue.
Jeff, I actually agree very much with what you're saying, and I think that we need to stay masked throughout the surge until we start seeing the numbers go down. One point of note that nobody brought up is that we've heard from a lot of teachers, and they have also stated that the substitutes that we do currently have stated that if we go mask optional, they will not come. So the few subs that we do have that are coming in regularly may very well stop coming in if we go optional, because that is a very big fear of theirs as well, worth noting. But I agree with Jeff. I think that we need to get up and over the hump of the surge. And I think that it's important to note that, like Ms. Gaiman had said, of the 90% of the union that responded to the survey, 80% of the teachers said, please keep us in masks. They're begging us to mask. Our health partners, the people that we rely on for the up-to-date guidance, are begging us to keep the masks on. If we're not going to listen to our staff and the doctors, who are we willing to listen to?
I mean, I also would.
We should listen to the parents and the students.
Okay, so.
Honestly, I'm not doing that for any applause or anything. I'm being serious. I think, Jeff, you read the New York Times. I'm sure you read the New York Times.
Unfortunately, well, I don't subscribe to the New York Times, it's
There was,
weird, but I do.
so there was an article, and this is the only point I want to make, and I'll pass the mic. So there was an article 5 days ago in the New York Times, No Way to Grow Up. And the most powerful message of this article was, you know, we tried to minimize the spread of COVID, a worthy goal absent other factors, rather than minimizing the damage that COVID does to society. we have accepted more harm to children in exchange for less harm to adults, often without acknowledging the dilemma or assessing which decisions lead to less overall harm. We've accepted more harm to children, and this is who we are. This is who we answer to. Okay, we answer to the education of the students for truly, and I can say this, for unvaccinated adults, for adults that have had a choice. So I have a big problem with that.
Okay, but about half of our community has asked us to keep the kids masked. So you have half of the community, plus the teachers, plus the doctors, all asking you to mask, and then you have the other half of the community saying, please make them optional. So why is one worth more than the other?
I mean, I think that's a very important question to ask. I mean, look, I agree that it's unfortunate that it's kids that have ended up being the ones that are really good and wear their masks. I mean, but it also further demonstrates what happens when masks are optional in certain settings, right? Like when the CDC lifted their guidelines with respect to masking for everyone, and mandates expired, what have you, on state levels, the rates went up. And, that's when we were unmasked happily, but it was summer, it doesn't seem as exciting, but that's when the numbers started to go up, and then the CDC said, hey, if you are not vaccinated, you should wear a mask, but they didn't, right? Like people don't follow recommendations, even if they're strong recommendations, which is unfortunate. But one other point I just wanted to quickly make is that the definition of fully vaccinated is changing, right? So now we have boosters, and I will tell you that in certain settings, not in school certainly, but in activities like club sports, they are starting to adopt those guidelines, meaning if your child hasn't had a booster, that they would have to isolate even if they're no longer considered fully vaccinated, which, it's tricky, right? How things change. And, to Jeff's point, yeah, it's unfortunate we ended up saying mask so long. I get it. What happened before is, we didn't have a vaccine. So what has changed over time is that the isolation days are changing, right? At the beginning, it was 2 weeks, then it was 10 days, now, 5 days. So as we learn more about the virus and as we make advances with respect to vaccines and boosters, things get better. I don't think anyone anticipated that it would last this long. I mean, it's been my entire term. I was talking to my kids, I'm like, the whole time I've been up here, it's been the pandemic. And
It's
now
pretty sad for the kids. Okay, folks, we gotta move on to a board meeting. It's almost 7:30. We're past 7:30 at this point. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order.